today we are talking about what makes a good song. Why are some songs good? Why are some songs bad? And what's that really about? And as a songwriter, I think this is an interesting question because I've written dozens of songs and you may or may not like all of them, but that's not really what we're talking about. It's kind of this idea of like, if you write a song, how do you know it's good? Or how do you know it's bad? Or how do you even know that it's a song? I've thought about this quite a bit. And here's kind of some things that I've come up with that I think make a bit of a difference in terms of what is a good song or not. And I'm just going to give them to you here on screen. First, I think a good song is simple, memorable, and relatable. So a lot of songs have this notion of they stick with you. They're kind of hooky. They have something about it that is just really good, and you don't know why it sticks in your head, but it does. Now, part of the reason certain songs stick in your head is if you listen to them more than once, they literally will stick with you because they become like memories. So you're not even just hearing the song, you're hearing these memories of stuff that's happened more than once, or the songs become associated with stuff that's happened, right? So like back when people used to watch a lot of MTV, they didn't just remember the song, they also remembered like the visual of the video and how that made them feel, or hanging out with their friends and all that kind of stuff. And so music is memorable in a very specific kind of way, but a lot of times it also has to be relatable. So like, for example, a lot of popular songs or songs that we think are good are about relatable topics like love or loss or joy or sadness or anger or stuff that the audience goes, yeah, that's me in the song. So I think that those kind of like simple, memorable, relatable things are part of what makes a good song, but not necessarily all songs fit into this category, right? So there are songs that might be brilliant songs, but maybe they're like really complicated, or maybe they're obscure, or maybe there's something that is really good, but only to certain people at certain times or whatever, right? So there's context that you have to kind of take into consideration. But so just kind of one idea being, maybe they're simple, maybe they're memorable, maybe they're relatable. A second idea that might describe a good song is a good song is what some people in country music have described as 3 chords and the truth. And this is an old idea from back in like the 50s. There was a songwriter who described country music as 3 chords and the truth. And a lot of country music songs literally are just 3 chords and someone singing about something that happened in their life or an experience they've had, right? So that's the and the truth, because it's a lot of times a storytelling thing, or it's relating an emotional truth, right? And the 3 chords is a lot of those songs are simple songs with just 3 chords. Now, again, is all country music 3 chords and the truth? No, but you could probably boil the essence of it down to that. And again, you could probably boil down a lot of the songs that are popular or famous or what have you down to very few chords, like 3 or 4 chords. In fact, on guitar, the 3 or 4 most popular sort of chords that everyone learns when they start, usually like a G chord, a C chord, and a D chord, those are often known as cowboy chords, because again, you could play like hundreds of songs with just a G chord, a C chord, and a D chord. 3 chords and the truth. And I've even written a ton of songs that are just a G chord, a C chord, and a D chord mixed up in different ways. And, you know, those make great worship songs. They make good country songs. They probably make good pop songs. So that whole notion of 3 chords and the truth, it's not so far from the notion of being simple, memorable, and relatable, right? But again, there's not one definition for a good song, which kind of leads me to this third notion, which is a good song is unpredictable. And here's what I mean. If you study songs and songwriting and music at all, you will find a very weird fact, which is people have no idea what the hits are. I mean, literally no one has a clue of how to figure out what the hits are. Now, there's a few people who have written a lot of hit songs. For example, Lennon and McCartney wrote most of the Beatles songs, right? So they wrote a lot of hit songs. But there's plenty of other people, like for example, Prince, who's an amazing songwriter and wrote literally thousands of songs, produced his own music, performed his own music. Brilliant, brilliant guy. But you can go on YouTube and watch videos where people he worked with will tell you he didn't know what the hit songs were. He would have a song that he really liked, that he wanted to be the lead single or whatever else. And sometimes they did well and sometimes they didn't. And sometimes songs that were recorded really fast did well and sometimes they didn't, you know. But like, it's a very, like, songwriting is an unpredictable process. You know, I think there's a story of Willie Nelson went for a drive one time back in the 50s. And I think it was like a long road trip or something like that. But he was driving at night, and in his car, away from his guitar or anything, just in his head, he wrote like 3 of his biggest hit songs on one road trip. It's random, right? Now, if this were predictable, there would be a factory staffed with songwriters that just crank out hits and they only write good songs. But the thing is they can't do that because if the music industry could do that, like back when albums were a much bigger thing, there was a notion that a lot of times an album had, you know, 1 to 4 really great songs that they usually released as singles. And then there were like 10 or 12 other songs, which were fine, but maybe not great. Now, that's not means that they weren't good songs. It just means that they were songs that for whatever reason, people didn't think were their best songs, but they're still on the album. If the record companies thought that they could get away with just putting out the best songs, they would only put out great songs, right? Like they would be like, hey, here's a great song. And instead of someone having, you know, a catalog of dozens of songs, they'd have like 3, and those songs would make all the money. But for some reason, the music industry didn't ever figure out how to do that. And so instead they just sort of like put out all this music. And then if something really resonated with people, they're like, hey, yeah, we love this song, play more of it. And obviously there was the whole thing about, you know, how they promoted songs, which maybe sometimes they push songs to try and make them great songs, whether people responded is a separate thing. But fundamentally, they didn't know any more about what was a good song than you and I do. I mean, no one kind of does until someone hears it, right? So you could also sort of make this third point into the idea that like, you know it when you hear it, but you have to hear it, you know? And so in a lot of ways, it's this very surprising and strange process of like writing a song or making a song or even just experiencing music and go like, why is this song just tickle my ears and that one doesn't? Why does this one make me cry and that one doesn't? You know, it's not like as a songwriter that this person's like, I'm going to try really hard to make this song amazing. This other one I just don't care about. You know, the songwriters don't really have that much control even over their own art. A lot of them, like Bob Dylan, will describe songs as sort of like coming through him via the muse or something. And that doesn't happen so much anymore, but it did when he was younger, and it's a surprising thing. I've had similar experiences, though I'm not Bob Dylan, definitely not Bob Dylan, but I've had similar experiences where a song just, I kind of refer to as like they show up. And I don't necessarily, I can't predict them. I can't just magically sit down with my guitar and go like, today I'm going to write a song and it's going to be a good one. You know, even if I was saying like, oh, I'm going to try and make it simple, memorable, or relatable, or I'm going to do 3 chords in the truth. Like, doesn't work that way. It really is a certain kind of magic. So those are kind of 3 things that I've kind of learned as someone who makes music about what makes a good song, which kind of led to this 4th test. And it's sort of my own litmus test of like, is it a good song? And years ago, I think it was like a interview or Behind the Music from, I think, Jars of Clay. They had this phrase where they were talking about why is Christian music at the time, and saying like the 90s, why was Christian music and, you know, mainstream music so different? Why is it that, you know, pop music or rock music sounded a certain way, but like Christian music couldn't, you know? And that they said like the phrase that was like, oh, a good song is just a good song. And, you know, a good song should be played. regardless of, to some extent, the instrumentation or whatever. And that phrase, like a good song is a good song, stuck with me. And somehow that morphed in my head to like, you know, it's a good song if you could sit down with like an acoustic guitar and play it. And again, this kind of gets back to the simplicity thing. And like, say for me, I do a lot of church music. And so for me, I've seen the thing where a lot of contemporary Christian music tends to have a lot of production, and it tends to be almost overproduced. And there's this whole thing in Christian music where it's like, you know, if you like mainstream genre or singer or band X, we'll give you the Christian sound-alike Y. You know, it's like, oh, if you liked Backstreet Boys, we'll give you this other group that sounds and acts just like them, but for Jesus, which to me is always a little bit weird. But it kind of has led me to this notion of like going, well, instead of saying you have to have all this production, what if you don't? What if you just have a piano or you just have an acoustic guitar? Does the song, like, can you still worship Jesus with that? Does the song work with just that? And, you know, I'm not exactly sure how I got there beyond kind of just this weird long and winding road, other than the bits that I've told you, but it's a weirdly useful test, because if you have a song that can be played and sound good and get across and you feel something with just vocals and guitar or just vocals and piano, right? Then fundamentally you can add to that, right? You can add production to that. You can have a bigger band. It can sound louder. It can sound fuller. It can sound more dynamic. You could add solos. There's a lot of stuff you can do. But the thing is there's a lot of music that might not be that good, but people are using production quality to try and make it something that isn't that good into something that is good, or that like sort of tricks you into being good. Whereas if you took all those tricks away and you said, can someone just sit there with a guitar and a microphone and just like pour their soul out into their instrument, into a crowd, and the crowd gets it, you know, and it makes you feel something and it sounds amazing. And if you can do that, then the song is good, the singer is good, the whole thing works. And then you can add to it. But if it doesn't pass that test, how good is it? Now, again, not all music even makes sense with a test like that. Because again, like instrumental music, right? Or really complex music maybe doesn't really work for, or stuff that's designed specifically with certain harmonies and melodies and, you know, whatever. Some things like that might not work with that. But I would challenge you to, you know, think about that though, because there is stuff that does. Like, for example, you know, dun, 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 you know, those kind of things, you know, you go, oh, that's a giant whole orchestra. But like, I can get that idea across to you in just a few notes with my voice, and your brain almost fills in the rest of the picture, because at the core, that complex piece of music can be simplified down to such a simple hook that has lasted for generations and people still love it, right? And so to some extent, you could play that on a piano or just, you know, acoustic guitar or something in a very simplistic way, and people would get it. And they'd be like, yeah, that's cool. Or I know what you're doing there. Or that's really neat. Imagine if we added more, right? And so that to me is the test of like, you know, and it kind of encapsulates a lot of these ideas of like, is it good with just vocals and acoustic guitar or a piano? Can you simplify it down to that? And if you can, I think it's a good song. And I think that most songs that we all sort of have in our heads, I mean, we all have our different songs that we like, right? But I think most music that resonates with people can probably be boiled down to something so simple that you go, yeah, it would still get across. It would still sort of, it's kind of like you could still get the joke, even if it's oversimplified version of the song. And so that's, to me, my test, and that's what I go with. So for me, what makes a good song is you know, if is it still good with just vocals and guitar? And if it is, it's a great song. Now, you know, there are cases where that's wrong, or there are cases where having a more complicated arrangement or production might in fact be dramatically better. And I'm not saying that that's not the case, but for me, most of the time, that's what it really is can you do it with just acoustic and vocals, or just acoustic if it's an instrumental thing, or just piano? And, you know, most of the time, it's a good test. So that's what I think makes a good song. Thanks for watching and have a good day.